Welcome to Behind the Scenes at 12 Scholars with me, Bob Buckley. In this short video, I'd like to take you on a bit of a journey from that printed publication through to becoming a podcaster as well. So if we go back to that original idea, or that crazy idea, 12 Scholars was always going to be that printed publication. And I've spoken in another video about how Brand B has heavily influenced the look, feel and design. But in this video, I thought I'd share with you some of the key decisions and some of the thinking that's gone on behind the scenes. So I'm going to introduce the 12 Scholars Journal. This here is book 1 or module 1. And in here, you'll meet 12 inspiring and successful people who are all known for being proactive. So I've gone and reached out to people who either I know or I could be introduced to who've got this innate ability to get things done. You know, they're all super proactive. So when we're conducting these interviews and meeting these incredible people, what's the best way to capture that information? How do we store that information? Well, years ago, you'd have used a cassette deck, and somewhere I'm sure I've got a cassette player with those original TDK-90s. But these days, people tend to use either iPhones or other such tech. So the tech solution and recording interviews was one key thing that we wanted to explore right from the start. Now, once we've got that audio, we'll then turn it into transcriptions and use our editing process to gain the insights and the key lessons from each of the featured scholars. So we've got the audio, we've got the transcription, we've got the editorial process. Great, we've got fabulous interviews for this. But I'm into podcasts, and I've been listening to podcasts for well over 10 years. And people like us do things like this. So some of the podcasts I listen to, they're not just your music podcast, but they're also kind of narrative, leadership, entrepreneurial podcasts. So once we've got this information, once we've got this digital recording, we could actually do something with it. So that's where this twin kind of aspect of, we've got the interviews for the book, but then we've also got this digital recording that we could turn it into a podcast. So that was really key from the get-go. But how do you become a podcaster? Well, always wanted to be the best and improve. I thought I'd explore some of the courses. And whilst listening to a podcast back, it would have been early October 2018, driving to my dad's house, I was listening to Seth Godin and his Akimbo podcast. And on there was an advert for the Podcasting Fellowship. And I've probably heard it a few times before. But that particular day, something kind of sparked in me that said, Bob, you're doing interviews for the book, you want to do a podcast, here's somebody who you respect, you look up to, who's doing a course on how to become a podcaster. So from that point, it was a no-brainer. That night, I booked myself on, and within a couple of weeks, I was on the Akimbo Podcasting Fellowship, where I've met some incredible people, and I've been very grateful for their support along the way. 2 years later, we're still very much in touch, helping each other, high-fiving each other on a weekly basis. So there we are. We've got the book, we've got the podcast, we've got this training course now. It was a 12-week program to learn how to be a podcaster. Because believe me, it's not as simple as it sounds. Not unless you really want to do yourself justice, but also if you want to treat your audience with respect, you've got to put in the time and effort to, what I believe, create a good podcast that somebody will then, make the most of. Because everybody's, precious with their time these days. So I wanted to make them as impactful as I could. So let's go back to the interviews. Each of the interviews we've done has typically been between 40 minutes to an hour. And okay, there's been some shorter interviews, 25 minutes or half an hour. But in the main, they've all been 40 to an hour, and sometimes longer. Jed King, we just had such a great conversation. It was about an hour and a half or 2 hours by the end of it. But once you've got this audio, yes, we've got the transcription. We can turn into the book, which is great. And there's 10 pages in here dedicated to every interview we do. 12 pages. But with the podcast, I wanted to kind of clip them and really make them kind of very impactful. And the podcasts that I listen to, typically around 20, 25 minutes. They're a nice sized commute, and that works for me. So that's who my target audience was. It was somebody who would be like myself, who gained great insights from 25 minute interview. So that's how the podcasting, the length and duration. Now, one of the questions people ask me is, well, what's the difference between the podcast and the book? Well, firstly, the interview was anything up to an hour, and the podcast are only 20 minutes. So we try and clip them and keep them impactful, but also so we can actually tell a story. So that's so they're kind of edited highlights. But also with the podcast, it also kind of brings people to life as well. So they're great for bringing each of these stories to life. So even if you only listen to 2 or 3 minutes of the podcast, it'll really help to digest the book. So the voice and kind of the clip highlights. But then with the book, what we wanted to do was actually bring our own take on it. So they're not just the actual transcripts of the interview. What we've done is we've taken that transcription and then turned it into a feature article. And we've used our editing team with Grace and Sarah and myself to pull those features together. So what we've now got is we've got the printed publication and the podcast. And although it's the same person and they're telling the same story, we see them as two completely different things. One's very curated, which is the book, and it's very structured with the introduction, the 3 key lessons, and the summary. And the podcast is a bit more free-flowing, less editorial, although I've gone to town on Adobe Audition. And in there, it's really nice, and we've clipped it, put some uplifting music as well. And that's kind of one of the key themes, that's one of the key things we've really enjoyed with the podcasts. So that's all I really wanted to touch on today. It was the journey from the journal through to the podcast, or from print to audio. I'll do another video about the actual equipment we've used, because we've invested in some really nice bits of kit. I'm looking here because we've got some mics and we've got the digital equipment and the camera and the headphones. But all the gear and no idea, I'm going to save that for another time. So thanks very much for watching. If you haven't subscribed, click the button. Again, I can't believe I'm saying that, but thanks so much for your time, and we'll see you next time.